All right, folks, let's do the ReactJS assignment. So there is an assumption within this assignment that you have foundational knowledge of basic Git commands, such as adding, committing, and pushing code. You can go back and follow the Git tutorial. There's an assumption within ReactJS itself that you have some familiarity with Node.js, with NPM, and with HTML and CSS, because basically what React is React.js. So remember, there's another React. It's called React Native. That's totally different. That's a totally different tool. But we're talking about React.js, and there's an assumption that you have all these tools under your belt because it's kind of a conglomeration of all these tools. And React does use tags and some of the same terminology that you would see in HTML, but they actually use a different term for the actual language within React. It's called JSX. So JSX is simply a syntax extension to JavaScript. Furthermore, and just to make things even more confusing, JSX is a combination of JavaScript and HTML and CSS. So for instance, you see HTML on the left here, you see JavaScript on the right here, and what you get after you basically conglomerate all these components is something like this here. So this is a returning a single root element, and this is kind of the code you will get. Obviously, you see that there's a div tag outside of the actual JSX code, and you would probably want to format it like so. Within the image tag, you put in some source, some alt, some class, which is not that far off from actual JavaScript. But I'm getting way off topic here. Let's go ahead with the project. So far we have basically looked at very basic React.js premises. Now we're going to get into it. So I would recommend that you go to AWS or DreamHost, which is my provider of choice, or Dream Compute, or there's other cloud providers out there. Get yourself a VM online. You'll normally get an IP address, so you could even deploy a website if you're so inclined. You can get that at DreamHost for about $6 a month. You may get some student discounts. I know that AWS has some free tiers that you can play with. The processing is not up to speed, but it might be a good option for you to get started working on the cloud. I would highly recommend working on the cloud because the cloud is here to stay. It's just a matter of fact in today's world. Okay, that being said, my Linux VM is on the cloud. I use a provider called DreamHost, and I am already logged in using VS Code. So this VS Code is actually literally tunneled in to the Linux headless server I have online. My Linux flavor is Ubuntu 22.04. That's a long-term support. There's 23.04 as well, but I don't know if that's long-term support yet. You want to get a Linux box that basically has long-term support. You could actually do it locally as well if you prefer that method, by VM, virtual machine. There's plenty of free VM stuff out there. I can't recommend anything off the top of my head because I haven't used a VM in a very long time, but there's something you could do if you have a PC at home. There's also Windows subsystem for Linux. I don't know too much about it. I know it lives in my box, but not embedded within Windows. It's actually got its own enclave, so to speak. I'll show you. So this is my WSL terminal, but you'll see that my Linux box, it's an Ubuntu box. I picked that flavor. You get to pick the flavor when you install the Windows subsystem for Linux, but it is its own separate enclave. I can't think of a different word. Linux has a different OS, it has a different kernel, and it has a different disk format. So Windows figured out a way to kind of do it locally on the PC, Windows 10 and above, and depending on the actual version on Windows 10, you will be able to deploy a Linux subsystem. That being said, I've never played with React within the Linux subsystem. I have, however, played with React within Windows Terminal, or PowerShell rather. So a lot of the commands are the same. I think you need to put WinPTY, but I'm not 100% sure on that, and I'm not going to do a Windows system or subsystem for Linux tutorial. I'm going to do it straight up on a Linux box. Okay, so let's get back to the instructions. Prerequisite Node.js 14 and above, NPM 5.6 and above. Let's go ahead and check if we have that. Node version is 16.6 and NPM version 8.19. So we do have that. What's next? Create React app. So we're going to use the npx command. npx is actually embedded within the npm. There's other ways to do it by, downloading the actual React library and then using the React library to start a React app or create a React app. But we'd rather do npx because npx is always going to automatically download what we need right there and then. So let's see about this create React app. I don't know how old this document is, but so we're going to copy this and we're going to go back to our terminal. And to those keen-eyed among you, you will notice that I actually made a directory here. Made a directory named React 8. I was completely wrong in doing that because the npx command is going to create a directory for the React 8 application. By the way, it's all lowercase, but just a footnote. And right now, we can go ahead and paste our create React app. This happens a lot with your paste command here. There's some kind of it might be local to my machine, but I've seen it happen to other people. So you might want to just clean it up before you do that. And React app. And this is the name of the app. So again, I use Windows and Linux shortcuts, so sometimes I get it mixed up. npx create React app is the npx command that'll go up in the cloud, download the React app, utility to create the app. I know that sounds kind of verbose, but it's actually what it does. And now you have to name the app. So in keeping with the naming conventions we have so far, I'm going to name it React 8. There might be a specific name you want to use for yourself, so make sure and do that. But let's go ahead and create the React app. Oh, okay. That's fine. I forgot about that bit of tidbit. So we have to name it with all lower caps, or it can't start with a capital letter. I forgot about that. Let's go ahead and do this. As you can see, the Visual Studio window is doing some stuff in the background there. It kind of started creating the React 8 directory. It immediately created a React 8 directory. That means this React 8 directory right here is redundant. We can go ahead and delete it. Now there's two ways to delete that. You could go ahead and right click and delete it, or you can actually go into the directory system and remove React 8. I think it was called React 8. But it's no longer there, so we don't need to do that right now. We just kind of use the right click on VS Code. So what happens with VS Code when you SSH into a box online into a VM in whatever provider you choose, is it's going to have its own VS Code subfolder. Basically, here you go. There's two of them. It's going to create a VS Code subfolder everywhere you open a folder to make sure that it has all the functionality available in order to do what I just did, which was right click and delete. It'll translate that right click and delete to proper Linux terminology. It'll say remove React 8 folder in the background, and then it'll remove the folder. That being said, we're done here. It's going to take a little while. It was a success. Okay, let's see what happened with our React 8 application that we just built. So first things first, you will notice that on the VS Code, again, I am SSH'd into my Linux box online. It reflects the file system. The Explorer reflects the file system within Alexander the Not So Bad.us, which is my domain name. And this particular file system reflects all the directories within it. So I am in Alexander the Not So Bad.us directory, and I can actually list the directories. I prefer list with attributes. And as I can see, we have a VS Code folder, which, as I said, VS Code creates in the Linux environment in order to be able to do the functionality that it does. Like, for instance, if I want to delete this, I can say delete. And what VS Code will do in the background is RM, or remove the file. But anyway, we can see that React 8 is one of the directories in the system, so we need to change directory to React 8. Now, I've also tabbed. Linux is smart enough, or actually bash within Linux, which is what I'm using. I'm using the bash shell within Linux. I can change directories to React 8, so we are literally exactly in the same directory as VS Code. I've also went ahead and opened the package.json, which is the file that actually translates the npm commands into our React commands, right? So we know that we can start this project within the React 8 folder using npm, if I spell right, start. What does npm start do? Well, it actually, in debug mode, it starts equals, and this is a JSON format. So if you guys are not familiar with all this, then you probably need to start getting familiar. It is a lot of information if you have if you're not inclined to look into Linux and port and SSH in. But I cannot unwrap all that. Let me just focus on what's happening here. We ran the npm start command, so that is in our terminal. It compiled successfully. That means that it actually created a app at localhost 3000. Now, mind you, this is localhost 3000 within the Linux box. But what VS Code comes packaged with is a port forwarder. So I don't know if that's the right terminology, but it basically forwards my port to the local. So as you can see, my local PC also says local 3000. That's just a way to forward that port from my Linux box to this local browser. This is my local browser. Now, to be very clear, this is where we need to start editing, right? So let's find that within the context of our React application.